Sarah Miller woke up early that morning. The sun was just coming up. She made herself a cup of tea and some toast. Today was important. She had to visit her sister in the hospital and also check on one of her banks. Sarah did not look rich. She wore simple blue jeans and a plain gray sweater. Her gray hair was tied back in a neat ponytail. She carried an old brown purse that she had used for many years. No one would guess that she owned many banks across the city. 10 years ago, Sarah had started with one small bank. She worked hard and smart. Now she owned the First City banking group with 50 branches. But Sarah never changed her simple ways. She still lived in the same small house. She still drove her 10-year-old car. She still wore the same kind of simple clothes. Money doesn't need to show, Sarah often said to people who asked why she didn't buy fancy things. Sarah got into her car and drove downtown. Her sister Jane needed help with hospital bills. The insurance didn't cover all the costs. Sarah was going to give her sister $2,000 in cash. After that, she had a meeting with her company's board. She parked her car in front of the First National Bank, one of her many branches. She didn't tell anyone she was coming. Sarah liked to visit her banks without warning. This way, she could see how they really treated regular customers. A bank should serve everyone the same way. Sarah always told her managers. It doesn't matter if they wear fancy clothes or simple ones. Sarah walked into the bank. It was busy. About 10 people were waiting in line. Sarah joined them. She waited patiently for her turn, watching everything around her. She saw a young mother struggling with a baby. She saw an old man counting coins carefully. She saw how the tellers talked to each customer. Some tellers smiled. Some did not. Sarah made mental notes of everything. When it was finally her turn, Sarah walked up to the counter. A young man named Tom sat behind the glass. He looked tired, but managed a small smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Tom asked. "Good morning," Sarah replied with a warm smile. "I need to withdraw $2,000 from my account, please." She handed him her ID card and bank card. Tom looked at her cards, then at his computer screen. His eyes widened a little when he saw her account balance, but he quickly hid his surprise. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said. "For withdrawals over $1,000, I need to get my manager's approval. It's bank policy." Sarah nodded. She knew this rule. She had helped create it for security reasons. "Of course I understand," she said. Tom picked up his phone and called the manager. "Mr. Dawson, I have a customer who wants to withdraw $2,000. Can you come over for approval?" Sarah checked her watch. It was 9:15 a.m. She had a board meeting at 10 o'clock a.m. There was plenty of time to get the money and drive to the hospital to see Jane before the meeting. What Sarah didn't know was that the next 9 minutes would change everything. In less than 10 minutes, she would fire a bank manager, expose bad service, and remind everyone why treating all customers with respect matters. Richard Dawson walked across the bank floor with confidence. He was the manager of this branch for 3 years. He wore an expensive gray suit and shiny black shoes. His hair was perfectly combed, and his gold watch sparkled under the lights. Richard liked to look important. He believed appearances mattered in banking. He often told his staff to give special treatment to customers who looked wealthy. "They bring us more business," he would say. Sarah watched him approach. She could tell a lot about people by how they walked and how they dressed. Richard seemed proud. Too proud, perhaps. "Good morning," Richard said to Tom first, not even looking at Sarah. "What's the situation?" "Ms. Miller here wants to withdraw $2,000, Tom explained, showing Richard the computer screen. Now Richard looked at Sarah. His eyes quickly moved from her simple clothes to her worn purse. His smile became smaller. Sarah noticed this change right away. "Ms. Miller," Richard said, his voice different now, less friendly. "Withdrawing such a large amount requires proper verification. Do you have any additional ID with you?" Sarah raised her eyebrows slightly. "I have my driver's license and my bank card. I've been a customer here for 15 years. Richard looked at her ID again, then at the computer. Yes, but our policies have changed. For security reasons, we need to be extra careful with large withdrawals, especially for regular customers. The way he said regular customers made it clear what he meant. He thought Sarah was just a simple woman with not much money. Her clothes made him think she wasn't important. Is there a problem with my account? Sarah asked calmly. No, Richard said quickly. But perhaps you could use a check instead. Or maybe come back tomorrow with more identification. Several people in line were watching now. Sarah noticed an older woman behind her whispering to someone else. The bank was getting busier. Mr. Dawson, Sarah said, keeping her voice low, my identification is valid, and my account has more than enough money for this withdrawal. What seems to be the real problem here? Richard's face showed a flash of annoyance. He wasn't used to being questioned. Ms. Miller, I'm just following bank procedures. Perhaps we could discuss this in my office. Sarah checked her watch again. 9 minutes had passed since she entered the bank. She still had time before visiting her sister and attending the meeting. Yes, let's do that, she agreed. As they walked to his office, Sarah noticed more things about the bank. The plants needed water. One of the information posters was outdated. A ceiling light was flickering. Small details that showed the manager wasn't paying attention to everything. Richard's office was large and neat. He had many awards on his wall and pictures of himself with important-looking people. He sat behind a big desk and pointed to a chair for Sarah. Now, Ms. Miller, he began in a voice that people use when talking to children. I understand you're in a hurry, but we have rules to follow. Sarah sat down and placed her old purse on her lap. She looked Richard directly in the eyes. Mr. Dawson, I'm curious. Would you treat every customer this way, or just those who dress like me? Richard's smile disappeared completely. This wasn't going the way he expected. Excuse me, Richard said, his face showing surprise and a little anger. I treat all customers the same way, Ms. Miller. This has nothing to do with how you dress. Sarah kept her eyes on him. She had dealt with many people like Richard in her life. People who judged others by their clothes, their cars, or their jewelry. Then why do I need extra identification when my account has enough money and my ID is valid? Sarah asked simply. Richard shifted in his chair. As I explained, it's for security reasons. Large cash withdrawals are sometimes linked to scams targeting older people. We're just being careful. Sarah almost smiled. So now it was about her age, not just her clothes. She decided to change her approach. Mr. Dawson, how long have you been the manager here? She asked. The question seemed to surprise him. 3 years, he answered, sitting up straighter. And I've increased our customer base by 15% in that time. Impressive, Sarah said. And do you know who owns this bank? Richard looked confused by the strange question. Well, it's part of First City Banking Group. Everyone knows that. And who owns First City Banking Group? Sarah continued. I don't see how this is relevant to your withdrawal, Richard said, becoming impatient. Some big investors, I suppose. Now, about your request. Sarah opened her old purse. From it, she took out a small leather wallet. Inside the wallet was a business card. She placed it on Richard's desk and pushed it toward him. Please read that, she said quietly. Richard picked up the card with an annoyed look. Then his face changed completely. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The card read, Sarah Miller, majority shareholder and chairperson, First City Banking Group. Your. Richard couldn't finish his sentence. Yes, Mr. Dawson. I own 51% of this banking group. I'm your boss's boss, you could say. Richard's hands began to shake slightly. Ms. Miller, I had no idea. If I had known who you were. Sarah raised her hand to stop him. And that's exactly the problem, isn't it? If I had been wearing expensive clothes or flashed a diamond ring, you would have treated me differently. She leaned forward, But that's not how banking should work, Mr. Dawson. Every person who walks through those doors deserves the same respect and service, whether they're wearing designer clothes or simple jeans, whether they're withdrawing $20 or $20,000. Richard was sweating now. Of course, Ms. Miller, I completely agree. This was just a misunderstanding. Sarah checked her watch. She had been in the bank for exactly 15 minutes now. Is it a misunderstanding, though, or is it how you normally operate? Richard didn't answer. He couldn't meet her eyes anymore. Let me tell you why I'm really here today, Sarah continued. Every month, I visit different branches without warning. I dress normally and act like a regular customer. I want to see how our staff treats people when they don't know the boss is watching. Richard swallowed hard. I see. So far, your branch has shown me that you judge people by their appearance, make simple transactions difficult, and talk down to customers you think aren't important. Sarah's voice remained calm, but her words were sharp. Outside the office, the bank continued its busy morning. No one knew that inside that small room, a manager's career was falling apart in minutes. For a long moment, Richard said nothing. He just stared at Sarah's business card, as if hoping it might disappear. Finally, he looked up with a forced smile. Ms. Miller, please let me apologize. Had I known who you were. That's still the wrong answer, Mr. Dawson, Sarah interrupted. You shouldn't treat me well because I own the bank. You should treat everyone well because that's your job. She took out her phone and checked the time again. She had promised to visit her sister Jane before the board meeting. She needed to hurry, but this situation needed to be handled first. Do you know why I started this banking group, Mr. Dawson? Sarah asked. Richard shook his head. 10 years ago, I went to a bank to get a loan for my first business. I had a solid plan and good credit, but I was dressed much like I am today. The banker barely looked at my application. He called me dear and sweetie and suggested I ask my husband to come in instead. Sarah's eyes showed old pain from that memory. I didn't have a husband, but I did have determination. I built my business without that loan. It became successful, and eventually, I bought that same bank. The first thing I did was fire that banker. Richard's face became even paler. Since then, I've made it my mission to create banks where everyone is treated with respect. Rich or poor, young or old, no matter how they dress or speak. Sarah's voice grew stronger. That's the foundation of First City Banking Group. Richard nodded quickly. Yes, of course. I completely support that mission, Ms. Miller. Sarah looked at him carefully. Do you? Because what I saw today tells a different story. She opened her purse again and took out a small notebook. In the 15 minutes I've been here, I've seen several problems. Frontline staff looks tired and stressed. Your junior teller, Tom, was the only one who smiled at customers. The plants need water, signs are outdated, and you're more concerned with appearances than service. Richard looked shocked that she had noticed so many details in such a short time. But worst of all, Sarah continued, you judged me by my clothes and age. You made assumptions about who I am and what I deserve. That goes against everything our company stands for. Ms. Miller, please, Richard began, desperation in his voice. I can explain. Sarah held up her hand again. I don't need explanations. I need action. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Hello, James. It's Sarah. I'm at the downtown branch right now. She paused, listening. Yes, that's right. Could you please send Melissa over immediately? We need an interim manager. Another pause. Yes, effective immediately. I'll explain at the board meeting. Richard's mouth fell open as he realized what was happening. Sarah was firing him. Right now. On the spot. Ms. Miller, please, I have a family. A mortgage. I need this job, he pleaded. Sarah ended her call and looked at Richard with firm but not unkind eyes. Mr. Dawson, I'm not heartless. You won't be fired from the company. Richard's shoulders relaxed slightly. But you can no longer be a branch manager. Sarah continued. You'll be transferred to our training department, where you'll learn our core values again. Your salary will be adjusted accordingly, of course. Richard's relief vanished. A training position would mean a significant pay cut. You have 9 minutes to clear your personal items from this office, Sarah said, standing up. Melissa Henderson will be here shortly to take over as interim manager. Richard stood up, his legs shaky. 9 minutes. But I've been here for 3 years. I can't pack everything in 9 minutes. Sarah looked around the office. There were many personal items. Golf trophies, family photos, a collection of expensive pens. 9 minutes is all I was given to complete my transaction, Sarah said. It seems fair to give you the same time. Richard began taking items from his desk, moving in a daze. This isn't right, he muttered. One mistake shouldn't erase 3 years of work. Sarah watched him for a moment. Was it just one mistake, though? Or was it how you run this branch every day? She walked to the office door, but stopped before opening it. By the way, I still need to withdraw $2,000 for my sister's medical bills. Please make sure that happens before you leave. Richard nodded quickly, still trying to gather his belongings. Sarah walked back to the main floor of the bank. The line of customers was even longer now. Tom, the young teller, looked up and seemed surprised to see her coming from the manager's office. Is everything okay, ma'am? Tom asked when Sarah approached his window again. Yes, Tom. Mr. Dawson has authorized my withdrawal, Sarah said with a small smile. And please, call me Sarah. Tom quickly processed the withdrawal and counted out $2,000 in cash. Here you go, Sarah. He handed her the money with a genuine smile. Thank you, Tom. You've been very helpful and professional today, Sarah said, putting the cash in her purse. How long have you worked here? 6 months, Tom answered. It's my first job after college. Sarah nodded. Do you enjoy it? Tom hesitated. Most days. I like helping customers, but he looked around to make sure no one was listening. But what? Sarah encouraged. Sometimes the rules seem more important than the people, Tom said quietly. Mr. Dawson is very strict about following procedures, even when they don't make sense for the situation. Sarah smiled. This young man understood what banking should be about. People, not just rules. Tom, would you mind giving me your full name? I'd like to remember it, Sarah said. Thomas Chen, he replied, looking curious. Sarah wrote his name in her small notebook. Thank you, Thomas Chen. You might be hearing from our corporate office soon. Just then, a professional-looking woman in her 40s walked into the bank. She wore a navy blue suit and carried a tablet. She looked around with purpose, then spotted Sarah. Ms. Miller, she said, approaching quickly. I came as soon as James called me. Melissa, thank you for coming so quickly, Sarah greeted her. Richard is in his office. Well, your office now, collecting his things. Melissa Henderson had been with First City Banking Group for 8 years. She started as a teller and worked her way up to regional supervisor. Sarah had always admired her work ethic and people skills. What happened? Melissa asked quietly. I'll explain everything at the board meeting, Sarah replied. For now, this branch needs new leadership, someone who treats all customers with respect, regardless of how they look or dress. Melissa nodded firmly. I understand. I'll take care of things here. Good. My first suggestion is to look at Tom Chen. He's the only teller who treated me like a human being today. Melissa made a note on her tablet. I'll start there. Sarah checked her watch again. She needed to hurry if she wanted to see her sister before the board meeting. I trust you, Melissa. Make this branch what it should be, a place that serves everyone equally. Sarah drove to City Hospital, thinking about what had just happened. In less than 30 minutes, she had exposed poor management, fired a bank manager, and possibly changed the direction of a young teller's career, all because she dressed simply and asked for her own money. The hospital parking lot was busy. Sarah found a spot far from the entrance and walked quickly through the cold morning air. She carried a small bag with her sister's favorite snacks and the $2,000 in cash. Jane Miller was in room 305. She had been there for 2 weeks after her heart surgery. The insurance covered most costs, but not all. The extra $2,000 would help with special medications and home care after Jane left the hospital. Sarah knocked softly on the door before entering. Jane was sitting up in bed, looking at a magazine. At 55, she was 3 years younger than Sarah, but looked older now because of her illness. Her face brightened when she saw her sister. "Sarah, I didn't expect you until afternoon," Jane said, putting down her magazine. Sarah kissed her sister's cheek and sat down beside the bed. "I wanted to come early. I have a board meeting at 10 o'clock, but I needed to see you first." Jane noticed the small bag. "You brought snacks again. The nurses will scold you." Sarah smiled. "Let them try. Besides, hospital food is terrible. You need proper nutrition to heal." They chatted for a few minutes about Jane's recovery. The doctors were pleased with her progress. She might go home next week if all continued well. Finally, Sarah took out an envelope from her purse. "Here's the money for the extra medications and the home nurse," she said, handing it to Jane. Jane took the envelope but looked troubled. "Sarah, you've already done so much. Your money paid for this private room. You visit every day. I can't keep taking from you." Sarah shook her head firmly. "It's not taking if I'm giving freely. Besides, what's money for if not to help the people we love?" Jane's eyes filled with tears. "But you work so hard for your money." Sarah almost laughed. If only Jane knew that the work Sarah did now mostly involved attending meetings and making big decisions. The real hard work had been in the early years. "Jane, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes," Sarah said gently. "You know I live simply. I don't need fancy things." "You could at least buy a new purse," Jane teased, pointing at Sarah's worn leather bag. "That thing is ancient." Sarah patted her purse fondly. "This was Mom's, remember? She carried it for 20 years, and now I've carried it for 15. It reminds me of where we came from." Their mother had raised them alone after their father left. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She taught them the value of hard work and simple living. "Mom would be so proud of you," Jane said softly. "From that little sandwich shop to owning banks across the city, it's incredible." Sarah smiled at the memory of her first business. Miller's Sandwich Shop. One shop became 3, then 10. She sold the chain for millions and invested in banking. Now her banking group was worth billions. "Mom would be proud of both of us," Sarah corrected. "You raised 3 amazing children while teaching full-time. That's harder than anything I've done." Sarah checked her watch. It was 9:30 a.m. She needed to leave for her meeting. "I have to go," she said, standing up. "Board meeting about quarterly results." "Will you tell them about what happened at the bank this morning?" Jane asked. She knew about Sarah's surprise visits to her own banks. "Oh yes," Sarah said with a determined look. "Today's events will be our main topic. It's time for some changes in how we train our managers." Sarah hugged her sister goodbye and walked back to her car. As she drove to the corporate headquarters, she thought about Richard Dawson and his mistake. He had judged her by her appearance, not knowing she could fire him with 1 phone call. But Sarah didn't feel happy about firing him. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure her banks stayed true to their purpose, serving all people with respect and dignity. The large glass building of First City Banking Group headquarters came into view. Sarah parked in her reserved spot but smiled at the irony. The CEO parking space was reserved for S. Miller, yet half the employees wouldn't recognize her if she walked in wearing her regular clothes. Maybe that was her next surprise inspection, her own corporate office. Sarah walked into the large meeting room on the top floor of the First City Banking Group building. 12 people sat around a long table. They were the board members who helped run the company. Most wore expensive suits and watches. Sarah, in her simple jeans and sweater, looked very different. Some new board members looked surprised to see her dressed so plainly. The older members were used to it. They knew Sarah never changed her simple style, even for important meetings. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah said as she took her seat at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming." James Wilson, the company's chief operating officer, sat to her right. He was in his 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. He had worked with Sarah from the beginning. "Before we start our regular meeting," Sarah said, "I want to discuss something that happened this morning." Everyone became quiet and paid attention. When Sarah had something important to say, smart people listened. "I visited our downtown branch today," she began. "I went as a regular customer, as I often do. I tried to withdraw $2,000 from my personal account." Sarah told them everything that happened. She explained how the manager, Richard Dawson, had treated her differently because of how she looked. She described his rude behavior and how he made simple banking hard for her. "I fired him on the spot," Sarah finished. "Melissa Henderson is now the interim manager there." No one looked surprised. They knew Sarah's strong beliefs about customer service. "The problem is bigger than one bad manager," Sarah continued. "If this happened at one branch, it might be happening at others too." James nodded. "What do you suggest we do?" Sarah leaned forward. "I want to change how we train our managers. We need to make sure they understand our core value. Treat everyone with respect, no matter what they look like or how much money they have." A younger board member named David raised his hand. "But how do we know if the training works? We can't visit every branch ourselves." Sarah smiled. "That's my next point. I want to start a new program. We'll hire regular people of all ages and backgrounds to visit our branches as mystery customers. They'll report back on how they were treated." "That could be expensive," said Linda, the chief financial officer. "Yes," Sarah agreed, "but not as expensive as losing customers because of poor service, and not as costly as damaging our reputation." The board discussed the idea. Some had concerns about the cost. Others worried about how to implement it. But most agreed it was necessary. "There's one more thing," Sarah added. "I met a young teller named Thomas Chen at the downtown branch. He was the only person who treated me with respect today, even though he didn't know who I was." James made a note. "What about him?" "I want him in our management training program," Sarah said. "He understands customer service better than his manager did." "That's the kind of person we need to lead our branches." The board agreed to all of Sarah's suggestions. They would change the training program, start the mystery customer visits, and invite Thomas Chen to join management training. As the meeting moved on to other topics, Sarah thought about Richard Dawson again. She didn't enjoy firing people, but sometimes it was necessary to protect what was important. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "How you treat people who can do nothing for you shows who you really are." That's why Sarah had built her banks different from others. That's why she would protect that difference, no matter what. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the downtown bank. Sarah sat in her small home office, reviewing reports from the first round of mystery customer visits. The results were eye-opening. Most branches provided good service, but there were problems at some locations. 5 managers had failed the test badly. They had treated simply dressed customers worse than those who looked wealthy. Sarah picked up the phone and called James. "Have you seen the mystery shopper reports?" she asked when he answered. "Yes," James replied. "I was about to call you. The results are concerning." "We need to act quickly," Sarah said. "Please schedule meetings with those 5 managers for tomorrow. I want to talk to them personally." After hanging up, Sarah turned to another report on her desk. This one was about Thomas Chen, the young teller from the downtown branch. Melissa Henderson had written it. "Thomas shows exceptional customer service skills," the report said. "He treats everyone with respect and patience. He would make an excellent future manager with proper training." Sarah smiled. Her instinct about Thomas had been right. She wrote a note to the HR department, asking them to fast-track Thomas into the management program. The phone rang again. It was Melissa from the downtown branch. "Ms. Miller," Melissa said, "you asked me to let you know if Richard Dawson contacted the bank. He came by today." Sarah was surprised. "What did he want?" "He asked to speak with you," Melissa explained. "He seemed different, humbler. He left a letter for you." Sarah thought for a moment. "I'll come by tomorrow to pick it up. How are things at the branch otherwise?" "Much better," Melissa said with pride in her voice. "Customer satisfaction is up 30%. Staff morale has improved too. People are happier to come to work." After finishing her calls, Sarah drove to the hospital. Jane was being discharged today. The extra medications and treatments had worked well. Jane was ready to go home, where a part-time nurse would help her recover fully. Sarah helped Jane pack her things and fill out the final paperwork. As they walked slowly to the car, Jane looked at her sister. "You've been quiet today," Jane observed. "Is everything okay with the bank?" Sarah helped Jane into the car before answering. "We found some problems at other branches. Managers who judge people by their clothes, just like Richard did." "What will you do?" Jane asked as Sarah started driving. "Fix it," Sarah said simply. "Fire the ones who won't change. Train the ones who can." Jane smiled. "You always were the strong one." Sarah shook her head. "You're strong too. You raised 3 kids alone after Michael left. That takes real strength." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Sarah thought about the banking world she had entered 10 years ago. It was built for the wealthy, not for regular people. She had been changing that, one branch at a time. "Do you ever regret selling the sandwich shops?" Jane asked suddenly. Life was simpler then. Sarah considered the question. Her chain of sandwich shops had been successful but small compared to her banking empire. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I can help more people this way. Banking affects everyone's life. If I can make banks better for ordinary people, that's worth the headaches." As they arrived at Jane's house, Sarah saw Jane's 3 children waiting on the porch. They waved excitedly, happy to have their mother home. Sarah helped Jane inside and made sure she was comfortable. The nurse would arrive in an hour. Everything was arranged. "Thank you," Jane said, holding Sarah's hand. "For the money, for everything." Sarah squeezed her sister's hand. "That's what family does. Rest now. I'll check on you tomorrow." As Sarah left Jane's house, she thought about family and values. The bank was her business, but it was also her way of honoring where she came from. Her mother had struggled with banks all her life. Sarah was making sure others didn't have the same struggles. The next morning, Sarah drove to the downtown branch early. She wanted to read Richard Dawson's letter before the workday began. Melissa met her at the door with an envelope. "He dropped this off personally," Melissa said, handing Sarah the letter. Sarah thanked her and sat down in what used to be Richard's office, now Melissa's. The office looked different now. The golf trophies and expensive pens were gone. Instead, there were plants and a wall with employee photos and achievements. Sarah opened the envelope and began to read. "Dear Ms. Miller," the letter began. "These 3 weeks have given me time to think about what happened. At first, I was angry about losing my position, but now I understand why. The training program opened my eyes. I saw videos of myself and other managers treating people differently based on how they looked. It was uncomfortable to watch. I want to apologize for how I treated you and likely many others. My behavior was wrong. The banking world I learned and taught us to focus on wealthy clients, but you created a different kind of bank, and I failed to uphold its values. I don't expect to get my manager position back, but I would like to remain with the company in whatever role you think appropriate. I have learned my lesson and want to be part of the solution. Respectfully, Richard Dawson." Sarah read the letter twice. It seemed sincere. People could change if given the chance. Her mother always said everyone deserves a second chance, but not a third. Later that day, Sarah met with the 5 managers who had failed the mystery shopper test. 4 were defensive and made excuses. Sarah fired them immediately. The fifth admitted her mistakes and asked for help to improve. Sarah sent her to the training program instead. One chance to learn was fair. After those difficult meetings, Sarah visited Thomas Chen. He was still working as a teller at the downtown branch, unaware of what was about to happen. "Hello, Thomas." Sarah greeted him at his window. Thomas looked up in surprise. "Ms. Miller, good to see you again. I've been reading reports about your work," Sarah said. "Very impressive." Thomas blushed slightly. "I just try to help people the best I can. That's exactly why I'm here." Sarah smiled. "We have a management training program starting next month. I'd like you to join it." Thomas's eyes widened. "Me? But I've only been here 6 months. Sometimes 6 months is enough to show a person's character," Sarah replied. "The program takes a year. After that, you could become an assistant manager." Thomas could hardly believe it. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Sarah's final stop that day was her sister's house. Jane was resting comfortably with the nurse's help. Her children had made dinner for everyone, including Sarah. As they ate together, Sarah watched the family interact. They didn't have much money, but they had love and respect for each other. That's what really mattered in life. Later, as Sarah was leaving, Jane walked her to the door slowly. "You look happy," Jane observed. "Did something good happen today?" Sarah nodded. "I fired 4 bad managers and gave 2 good people second chances. A productive day." Jane laughed softly. "Only you would consider firing people productive." "It's not the firing that's productive," Sarah explained. "It's making room for better people to grow. Like that young teller I told you about. He'll make a wonderful manager someday." Sarah drove home as the sun was setting. Her simple house waited for her, warm and familiar. She could have bought a mansion years ago, but what would be the point? This house had everything she needed. Inside, Sarah made herself a cup of tea and sat in her favorite chair. On the small table beside her was a photo of her mother, taken years ago in front of the first sandwich shop. "We did it, Mom," Sarah said to the photo. "We changed things, not just for us, but for everyone." Sarah Miller, the simple woman who owned banks, sipped her tea and smiled. 9 minutes in a bank 3 weeks ago had started something important. A small moment had created big changes. That's how real change happens, Sarah thought. Not all at once, but in small moments when someone decides things can be better. When someone stands up and says, "This is wrong. Let's fix it." 9 minutes. That's all it had taken to start fixing the system that had been broken for years. Sarah picked up her notebook and began planning the next round of mystery shopper visits. There was still work to do, many more banks to fix, many more lives to improve. And Sarah Miller, in her simple clothes with her simple ways, was just the person to do it.